And a very happy afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Tim Burgess back with Think and Grow Rich. And in this video, we'd like to go through the chapter on persistence, part 1. Now, I had persistence all messed up, all screwed up, and maybe you do too. Persistence is profitable. Stubborn is stupid. Now, let me explain the difference, if I may. Stubborn, I can be really stubborn, and I can walk through this wall, and eventually I can get to the outside. I mean, right on the other side of this wall is the outside. So we go through the drywall, we go through the insulation, we go through whatever wall there is out there, and then the brick. And eventually, if I walk through there over and over again, if I'm stubborn enough, I can make it. Stubborn. I was opening the door for a gentleman. It's raining. And I got to the door first, a good rain coming down. I opened the door, and he stood in the rain saying, "No, go ahead." I said, "Really, sir?" And I was under the canopy. I was under the canopy holding the door. He's standing in the rain saying, "No, go ahead. No, go ahead. No, go ahead." So eventually I went ahead and went in. He follows me in, and he's dripping wet. And he says this, "I knew I'd win." I knew I'd win? Excuse me, hey, your dumbass just stood in the rain while I was trying to hold the door open for you. So your stubborn is stupid. Now, what's the difference? What's persistence? See, persistence is the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. You want to persistently apply the 6 steps, especially step 6. Persistence, the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. He starts the whole chapter off and he says this. He says, persistence is an essential factor in the procedure of transmuting desire into its monetary equivalent. He says the basis of persistence is the power of will. Well, what is will? Will is one of the intellectual faculties of the mind. Will is one of our mental muscles. Let's just call them mental muscles for simplicity. So will is listed. It's up here. It's right there. So what is will anyway? Simple. It's focus. That's all it is. See, when you develop willpower, you develop your ability to focus on one task until completion. You develop the ability to focus on one image to the exclusion of all distractions. And make no mistake, we have distractions coming from every different direction all the time, every day. Some studies actually say you're distracted every 23 seconds. You're actually knocked off course every 23 seconds. So we want to make sure we take the time to develop this thing called will. Will is our ability to focus. He says, willpower and desire, when properly combined, make an irresistible pair. Take the desire that you have, the desire that you identified or that you've discovered from chapter 2. Now, right behind that desire, put the power of will and focus on that desire and only that desire to the exclusion of all distractions. When you stop and think about it, ladies and gentlemen, this is 3rd grade elementary simple. There's nothing hard about this. It's just we've been programmed completely differently. He talks about how people who accumulate great fortunes are generally known as cold-blooded and sometimes ruthless. He says often they are misunderstood. What they have is willpower, which they mix with persistence. So they have willpower, they mix it with persistence, and they put that right behind their desires to accumulate or accomplish some objective. In other words, they're so focused on one thing, they don't let themselves get knocked off track, and everybody else thinks they're cold-blooded and ruthless because they don't allow themselves to get knocked off track. Does that mean I have to be a cold-blooded and ruthless individual to not get knocked off track? No. See, I believe the perception from the outside is all wrong. See, if you have a really, let's call it a deadly focus, and I mean that in a very good way. Let's call it a lively focus. That's even better. Well, if you have a lively focus on one thing, you have all of your energy going to one objective, You have to apply persistence in holding on to that focus. Otherwise, you get knocked off track all the time. You know, you're focused on this today, and this tomorrow, and this the next day, and this the next day. Shoot, we might as well just go all the way around the room, right? And this the next day, and this the next day, and this the next day. There's no focus. Without focus, how could we accumulate or accomplish anything at all? Simple, you can't. He talks about how Henry Ford was generally misunderstood to be ruthless and cold-blooded. He talks about how this misconception grew out of Ford's habit of following through in all of his plans with persistence. You see, when Henry Ford made a plan, he followed through. Let's fast forward to today's world, and let's talk about this guy named Elon Musk. Does he follow through with his plan? Well, yeah. He makes a plan, he follows through. So he's cold-blooded and ruthless too, I'm sure, right? I don't even know the guy. We can't say that. And then he talks about this. And ladies and gentlemen, my bet is you might fall into this category. And let's just be honest with ourselves. He says the majority of people are ready to throw their aims and purposes overboard and give up at the first sign of opposition or misfortune. A few carry on despite all opposition until they attain their goal. He says these few are the Fords, Carnegies, Rockefellers, Edisons, Musk, Gates, Mark Cuban, Damon John, Barbara Corcoran, Jeff Bezos. Your name is right there too. All you have to do is apply the principles. All you have to do is apply the principles with repetitiveness over time. All you have to do is apply these principles with repetition over time. That's all you have to do. That's all they've done. That's called persistence. The sustained effort necessary to induce faith. That's all it is. He says there may be no heroic connotation to the word persistence, but the quality is to the character of man what carbon is to steel. Now, I read that for years, ladies and gentlemen, and I wasn't sure what he even meant by it. But the quality is to the character of man what carbon is to steel. Well, if I'm not mistaken, carbon is the strength to steel. Carbon is what brings strength to steel. So, what is the character of us? He says the building of a fortune generally involves the application of the entire 13 factors of this philosophy. These principles must be understood. They must be applied with persistence by all who accumulate money. So when he talks about persistence, ladies and gentlemen, let's make sure we understand something. He's not talking about being stubborn and standing in the rain while somebody's trying to hold the door open for you. He's talking about you making sure that you persistently apply these principles day in and day out until they become a fixed habit within you. That's what he's talking about. That's the persistence that Napoleon's talking about today. He says if you are following this book with the intention of applying the knowledge it conveys, your first test as to your persistence will come when you begin to follow the 6 steps described in the 2nd chapter. Are you doing that? Are you persistently applying step 6? Because remember, self-suggestion, what we say to ourselves on purpose by design with repetition over and over and over and over again is how we create faith where faith does not already exist. So if we don't persistently apply step 6 and we read our story or our statement out loud over and over again, at least right before we go to bed and as soon as we wake up, if we're not doing that, then we are not persistently applying one of the principles. And since desire is the starting point of all achievement, if we're not persistently applying the 6 steps, what the hell are we doing? These 6 steps are 2nd grade, 3rd grade elementary simple. What do you want? What do you give in return? What's the date? Create a definite plan and begin at once whether you're ready or not. Create a clear, concise statement of steps 1 through 4, and then read that statement out loud right before you go to bed and as soon as you wake up. Now, how hard is this? Come on, give me a break, ladies and gentlemen. This is so simple. But why aren't we doing it? Why aren't the majority of people who even study this material, they still don't do that one thing? Every morning before they do anything else, they take their mind into their story, into their statement. I call it a story because if you'll remember in chapter 4, what he calls autosuggestion, he said plain old unemotional words have no action influence on the subconscious mind. So if we create a story, we can emotionalize it much easier, much better. That's why I call it a story. So the fifth step is to create that statement, create that story, and then the sixth step is to read it. Are you doing that? Are you persistently applying yourself to that one thing? Because I can tell you, if you are, you will reach some high stations in life, very high stations in life. And if you're not, you won't. You'll get the same old, same old. You'll end up playing the damn blame game. It's always their fault, my fault. You ever notice that in society, how it's always somebody else's fault? They're always blaming somebody else, some other circumstance, some other thing, some other reason other than just accepting responsibility. Ever notice that? That's what will happen if we don't apply these principles. That's what will happen if we don't exercise persistence in applying the 6 steps. He says the author is checking you up at this point because lack of persistence is one of the major causes of failure. He says, moreover, experience with thousands of people has proved that lack of persistence is a weakness common to the majority of all people. It is a weakness which may be overcome by effort. So, are you willing to put the effort in? That is a fair question. Are you willing to put the effort in? He says the ease with which lack of persistence may be conquered will depend entirely upon the intensity of one's desires. What do you really want? Not what do you think you can have, what do you really want? What do you really want? Spiritual, social, mental, physical, family, and of course, yes, financial. But please don't make the mistake of thinking money's number one, because in the whole game of wealth, if you want true wealth in your life, make sure you understand money is not number one. It's very important in the game of life, make no mistake about that either, but it's not number one. The starting point of all achievement is desire. Keep this constantly in mind. Weak desire brings weak results, just as a small amount of fire makes a small amount of heat. If you find yourself lacking in persistence, build a stronger fire under your desire. How simple could it possibly be? Or maybe you haven't discovered what it is you really desire, because if you discover what you really desire and you're emotionally involved with what you really desire, what you really want to do, your definite major purpose, if you're really involved in it, it won't be hard to be persistent. And while I'm here, let me make sure we understand something. Definite major purpose, definite chief aim, and definite goal are not the same thing. They're not even close. And it's through studying Napoleon Hill's work that I've discovered that. I look forward to sharing that with you and a whole video about that when the time is right. But remember, they're not the same thing. Not at all. It says, continue to read through to the end, then go back to chapter 2 and start immediately to carry out the instructions given in connection with the 6 steps. Don't wait until we're done with the book. Do it now or when this video is over. And then he says this, the eagerness with which you follow these instructions will indicate clearly how much or how little you really desire to accumulate money, or how much or how little you really desire to accumulate or accomplish that thing that you've written down as your number one. Remember, number one, what do you want? Napoleon's checking us up. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are. We're on chapter 9. He's taking us back to chapter 2 and the 6 steps in the chapter on desire. Wouldn't that tell you that's probably pretty important? Wouldn't that tell you, reading between the lines, that we should probably make sure we have that piece of the puzzle correct? Remember, he says persistence is the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. How do we induce faith or create faith where it does not already exist? By repetition of affirmation of orders to the subconscious mind through the principle of self-suggestion. Once again, this isn't hard, ladies and gentlemen. It's not hard at all. I quit school in the 8th grade. I can figure it out. You can figure it out. Okay? Excuse me. He says, fortunes gravitate to those whose minds have been prepared to attract them. Attract them. He wrote that in 1937. Just as surely as water gravitates to the ocean. He says, in this book may be found all the stimuli necessary to attune any normal mind to the vibrations which will attract the objects of one's desires. He says, if you find you are weak in persistence, center your attention upon the instructions contained in the chapter on power. Surround yourself with a mastermind. We'll get to that in the next chapter. We talked a little bit about it in chapter 7, organized planning. Surround yourself with a mastermind group, and through the cooperative efforts of the members of this group, you can develop persistence. He makes sure he says this as well. Our subconscious mind works continuously while you are awake and while you are asleep. That's why it's so important to make sure you put into the subconscious mind what you want it to dwell upon while you sleep. And then he says this, and this is what I see so many people doing. This is the number one mistake across the board that I see so many people doing. He says this, spasmodic or occasional effort to apply the rules will be of no value to you. Spasmodic or occasional effort to apply the rules will be of no value. Oh, well, you know, a little bit's better than nothing. No, it's not. Go to the gym once a month. Eat healthy, eat right, you know, once a week. It doesn't work that way, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't work that way. Spasmodic or occasional effort to apply the rules will be of no value to you. To get results, you must apply all of the rules until their application becomes a fixed habit with you. The application must become a fixed habit. Reading of the story must become a fixed habit. Positive thought process, a fixed habit. That's what we're working on, right? He says, poverty is attracted to the one whose mind is favorable to it, as money is attracted to him whose mind has been deliberately prepared to attract it, and through the same laws. And through the same laws. Poverty consciousness will voluntarily seize the mind which is not occupied with money consciousness. A poverty consciousness develops without conscious application of habits favorable to it. The money consciousness must be created to order. Must be created to order. The money consciousness must be created to order, ladies and gentlemen. It's very simple. The chapter on persistence is nothing more than let us be persistent in applying chapters 2, 3, and 4. Chapter 1's the introduction. Let us be very persistent in applying chapters 2, 3, and 4. Desire, faith, autosuggestion, the foundation, persistence, the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. So I ask you, will you be persistent in applying these principles? Will you be persistent in demanding of yourself the application of the 6 steps? If you do, you're going to see very great changes in your life for the better. If you don't, you won't. It is just that simple. As always, ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Joe. Without Joe, we wouldn't be here, and it's my pleasure to be able to do this and to bring this material to you. My whole definite major purpose in life is to simplify this material to affect you in a positive way. That's what I live for. And Joe is the one who is the inspiration behind all of this taking place. So say thank you to Joe. As always, ladies and gentlemen, one of our strongest desires is that this day be the very best day you have ever experienced in this game we call life. Yesterday doesn't matter. Tomorrow isn't here. However, today we can allow it to be the very best we've ever experienced. And that is a simple decision. When you put your head on a pillow tonight, please do so with a mind full of peace. Remember, calmness of mind is one of the beautiful jewels of wisdom. And may God bless each and every one of you. Have a fabulous day.